Severin Films brings to Blu-ray the surviving episodes of a very rare, to me at least, 1968 Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, starring Peter Cushing as Sherlock Holmes and Nigel Stock as Watson. This was a BBC TV series that aired once in 1968. I learned from the extras on this. Was repeated once a few years later. It was shot on color videotape. It was aired in black and white because the BBC wasn't fully color by 68. And then it was rerun a few years later, minus some of the episodes on the BBC, and most of the tapes were wiped. If you don't know what that means, it's nothing to do with the bathroom. When the BBC, and American TV did this too, videotape in its early days was very expensive, and when they thought that a show was not going to have any future value, because in those days repaints and home video and streaming and on really weren't a thing. You'd show something once, you'd show something maybe twice, and after that the thought was, well, that's old, who cares, we're making new content. They would wipe the tapes, meaning they would just record over them. They would either wipe them to become blank tapes for future use or just flat out record over them. So a lot of BBC history, a lot of American TV history it was lost for that. So we have here on this set 6 episodes out of what I believe were, I want to say 16. They do mention it somewhere in here how many there were in total originally. And it's an interesting representation of what this show was. It's very studio bound. If you don't know British TV from the 60s, 70s, it really feels like a filmed play for the most part. Limited number of sets, shot on video. If they go outside for any reason, it's shot on film if they're ever on location anywhere. So there's always that interesting, I even noticed that there's a great Python gag in one of the episodes where they're doing a sketch inside and somebody opens a window and looks out the window and suddenly it's outside and he says, "Good heavens, I'm on film." So you do get the filmed inserts here. For me, being a big Peter Cushing fan from all of his Hammer and Amicus films, and you know him as Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars, any Peter Cushing that I've never seen is always welcome. So I'd never heard of this show, and the idea of seeing Peter Cushing on color videotape was very exciting to me, because to me, videotape, to quote Philip Baker Hall in Boogie Nights, videotape tells truth. Videotape looks more realistic. To me, it looks more like reality. So that I'm never going to meet Peter Cushing in 1968. So to see what he looked like on videotape was pretty cool to me. I think he did some TV appearances and stuff too. But other than this series, I get, and what I learned from this too, from the multiple commentaries. There's a commentary, by the way, for every episode, and I'll get into that. Peter Cushing initially was known for TV. He did an adaptation of George Orwell's 1984 for TV, which I think survives in some form now. And his TV success is what led Hammer to hire him. Then he sort of became a movie star, but would go back to TV. But I always think of him as a movie guy. See him in the context of a TV series is very cool. He plays a very playful Sherlock Holmes, I thought. He's somebody who is sort of delighted and almost giggly when the game is afoot, as it were. I haven't seen a tremendous amount of Sherlock Holmes, but I know there are mega fans who study the character in the books and have written spin-off books about the various characters and all the different movies. I've seen a bunch of the movies and a little bit of the TV. I know that there's the Jeremy Brett series that A&E ran endlessly for a while, and there were the old Basil Rathbone films and all this other stuff. There was a TV series for a while back in the 50s, but I don't know a lot of it, so this was pretty fresh to me. These are all based on original Arthur Conan Doyle stories, so these aren't fanciful ideas of Sherlock Holmes fighting dragons and things. These are adaptations of the stories. They're each about 50 minutes long, color videotape, as I said, and it's 2 discs, so I get choked up when I talk about color videotape. 2 discs. Disc 1 is the episode, they call them episodes 1 through 6, but they're really, I think they said maybe one of these on this disc set was the second episode of the series, but because most of them are gone, this is what we have left. It's episode 1 through 3 on disc 1, 4, 5, 6 on disc 2. They all have commentaries, and there are some extras. I'm not going to get into each episode because I don't want to spoil the episodes, and if you are a fan of Conan Doyle or Sherlock Holmes, when I read you these titles, you're going to know what they are anyway. So the audio on these are English. They have an audio commentary. There are English SDH subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. The Episode 1, as these are titled, Study in Scarlet. Episode 2 and 3 on disc 1 is Hound of the Baskervilles as a 2-parter. We're on to disc 2. Episode 4 is The Boscombe Valley Mystery. Episode 5 is The Sign of 4. And episode 6 is The Blue Carbuncle, which is, if that's the one I'm thinking of, yeah, it's almost like a Christmas episode, which is kind of cool. BBC was always good for doing Christmas episodes of their shows, so that fits right in with that. The audio commentaries on each episode are some combination of the following people. You have Kim Newman, who's a stalwart all on audio commentaries for anything British, and he's always great because he grew up in the 60s and beyond. So he, as opposed to growing up in the 60s and backwards, he knows about things. He'll talk about what the Radio Times listings were like for these movies. He's written books involving the Sherlock Holmes characters. He wrote a book called Anno Dracula. He's great if he's ever on listed as an extra. He's always worth a listen. Barry Forshaw, who's the author of Brit Noir, and David Stewart Davies, the author of Sherlock Holmes, A Century of the Master Detective on Screen. Every episode has a commentary with those guys. Everyone is worth listening to. When they'll talk about the careers of Cushing, they'll talk about how Holmes has been portrayed on screen. They'll talk about other adaptations of the same story that you're currently watching. If you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, I can't imagine you won't want this set. Continuing with the extras, there's an audio interview with Peter Cushing by Davies that was done on the set at Pinewood Studios during the production in 1974 of Legend of the Werewolf, where he talks specifically about this TV series, which is really cool to have because ain't nobody getting an interview with Peter Cushing about it now. Lost segments, and this is where my notes are here. Originally, the series was 16 episodes, and when it was rerun in 1970, 2 years later, they only ran 12 episodes because their contract with the Conan Doyle estate didn't allow for repeats of some of those, and they didn't allow for repeats after that second series. And then subsequently, that's what got wiped, and what's on this set is all that's left. The lost segments were black and white clips that were found in the vaults of a broadcaster, the Flemish broadcaster VPT, and it says here they are color recovered by a UK company called Kaleidoscope. They're colorized, and I didn't think they were colorized particularly well. I mean, they're as well as like 80s colorization looked, which to me, everything just has a flat tone and a very limited kind of unnatural color palette. So I don't like colorization. I know it's getting a lot better than it used to, but I'm just like, if it's black and white, let it be black and white. I know I read something somewhere where there was a way to recover the color in old BBC kinescopes that had, kinescope is when they would basically use a film camera to shoot a TV screen to have a filmed film print record of something that went out either live. The old Ed Sullivan shows with Elvis, those are kinescopes. The old Lost Honeymooners episodes with Jackie Gleason, those were kinescopes because they were done live and never recorded to videotape or film. There was a way some company found to recover the color, and maybe that's what this company did. There's some kind of information that's encoded in something in the signal that allows people to rebuild the color from that. Now, I don't know if that actually allows them to get color where there is none, or if it just gives them the information somehow in what the color should be. Anyway, I didn't think the colorization looked good. It just looked weird, and I would have been fine without it. It's 8 minutes of outtakes, bits and pieces from the episodes. Not a lot with Holmes, mostly with secondary characters. And it reminded me of Dark Shadows a lot, funny enough. So it's interesting to see if you're a fan of the series, or if you know more about the series than I do, you'd be seeing clips of something you've only ever read about. But otherwise, it's just sort of an interesting curio. And there is an optional commentary on that by Jonathan Rigby, author of English Gothic. And he talks about the episodes and the history of the show and all that. But it's really short. It's 8 minutes. Anyway, this is the packaging. You can see there, the packaging. And yeah, it's probably not going to focus. It's packaging and the discs. I'm really only doing this to show you the discs because I'm a sucker for discs with printed images. This is a really cool set. Now, how did I feel about this set? I thought it was a little dry, honestly. I like British TV of this era, and I love Peter Cushing, and that's what kept me rolling along. The Holmes things are fun. I like those. It's a little dry. It's not that it shouldn't be, but it's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of people in rooms talking. So some people may be put off. The casual viewer might not be into it for that, but if you like Peter Cushing and you're a fan of like Hammer and Amicus films, can't imagine you wouldn't want this. If you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I can't imagine you wouldn't want this. Bless Severin for putting this out, because I love old TV, I love old British TV, and I love old British TV that has a little bit of a genre angle to it like this does, and it's a great set. So, available from Severin Films on Blu-ray is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, or what's left of it.